Okay, so what I want to show you here is how we can actually change and make it so that we could get rid of those errors here if we wanted to change a constraint here. So if we go in here to, I believe it's under display, or no, maybe it's, can't remember where, I always have to go through these menus here. Setup, yes, setup and constraints. Now, this menu, there are a lot of different constraints that we can have here. There's spacing constraints, there's electrical constraints, there's physical constraints. And so let's look at these physical constraints here. So line width is, you might think it's an electrical constraint, but if we look at the electrical constraints, these are actually different things as far as talking about actually impedance of, the lines as far as your traces, and then you're actually talking about like timing delays based off it. So I mean, there's a lot of things that's actually really kind of more of an advanced thing. So the physical ones though are like the line widths here. So physical constraint, if I just say all layers here, we can see here line width minimum, and then there's also a maximum line width that you can make. And so we can just say, forget, you don't do it in the shadow box, you do it in this one here, in the green one. I can say I want to set that now to 0.5. Now the neck, I also, because that's like if you're doing a little turns here as well, I want to put that at 0.5 as well. And then I'm going to scroll across to see are there any other ones here. And none of the other things are there as well. So I'm going to now then close out of the constraints. I've changed those constraints. Now you might say these are still red. That's because I need to go through and do another design rule update. And now you can see those are gone now because I've changed the minimum line width from being 1 millimeter to 0.5 millimeters. Now, we are still perfectly okay as far as power consumption on those lines, on those traces. And we'll talk about that more later on in another week. So we've gotten all of our design rule checks to give me green now, which is a good place to be. Now I'm ready to create some what's called artwork files. Now, the very minimum ones to do a design here would be if you go to export, it's Gerber is what you're going to want. And the Gerber files contain all of the information as far as what you would need to know as far as etching goes. And then there's a positive and a negative mode, and that's depending on how, like if you're doing a photo mask, on whether you're wanting it to show what things to block out or what things that you should be displaying. And that will really just depends on the type of thing you're doing. We're almost always going to be using positive plot mode. I don't think there's going to be a case that we'll use it. But if I, for instance, go and hit the plus arrow, see it's doing the etch bottom, the pin bottom, the via class bottom as well. So those are all the different layers that it's putting in the etch class. So if I select that and I say create artwork, and it'll say completed with warnings or errors. And so I created the artwork and it says artwork had warnings. Bottom created with warnings. Where is the warning? Warning, generating English output data from a metric database may cause a slight round-off errors of coordinates in output file. Okay, that's fine. And I don't even know if there's a way that I could have it generate a metric-based one. But, the rounding issues are not something we're going to be concerned about. But now if I go here to this file explorer here, what we have now is this bottom.art file was created. And this is actually just a text file, and I've just associated Notepad with these text files. And I'm just going to double click it so that you can see what it is here. So what it is here is it is just a text file. It says Gerber, file name is bottom, layout positive mode. But then it's basically, um, if you're familiar with any kind of CNC thing, it's actually got basically tool paths that are being described here as far as the tool paths that it needs to do in order to make all of those traces, like how, and you can kind of even see X and Y coordinates, and then it's got the D03 and D02 and D01, and I'm not 100% sure what all of those things are. I've not really edited toolpath files before or anything of that nature, but that's what has been generated. And this is then imported by another program that would be the machine that actually etches the board, and this then contains the information. Now, there are more than just Gerber formats, but Gerber is one of the most common formats for these artworks. So that's why we would do export Gerber. Now there are Gerber parameters. Oh, notice here that there's this IPC 2581. I don't even know what that is. Um, hmm. I'm going to export that. Layer mapping settings were not found. I'm just going to create it. I'll have to see what that created for me. I'm just curious. I had never noticed that before. But then the Gerber creates the information for the etching. We also have to create information for this board because we are drilling holes. And so that's under NC drill. Now, there are a couple things that we have to do in order for our machine to properly be able to read this drill file in. First off, we need to click on NC parameters, and you need to select Enhanced Excelon Format. Then you need to select Auto Tool Select. Everything else you can leave the same, and then you just hit Drill. You can change the file name as well if you wanted to, but you just do Drill, and then it's successfully completed. And then I'll go ahead and look at this drill file as well. It's this one right here. This one you can also just use Notepad to open this up. I won't do the always, but you can just open it in Notepad. And this contains the drill information. Now what I like here is it's very clear here. So this the TO1, that's a 0.8 millimeter drill bit because it's in metric. TO2 is 0.9 millimeter drill bit. TO3, 1 millimeter drill bit. And then so it's saying here, okay, TO1. So gives also the information as far as how many quantity of each of these are we drilling. So it gives then the location for these. So for the 0.8, we have 6. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 coordinates. Now for this other one, it's got 16. And you might say, well, 1, 2, 3, 4. What's going on? But it's that it's got 1, and then there's repeating on here basically 3 times. And so that's going to get you 4 drill holes. This is another 4 drill holes. This is another 4 drill holes, and that's another 4 drill holes, so 16. And then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then these are just the locations on the board as far as it. So let's just go ahead and look at one of these locations. So it's 44, 5, and 21 here. So 44, 5, and 21. Let's go back here, close this. And at the bottom of the screen, you can see it's got these numbers here. So 44, 5, and 21. So it's drilling this hole right here. because if I center it on that hole, I can't really center it on where the drill bit is because, this is 44 and then this is 45, 44, 45, so 44.5 and 21. And you can see it's got 4 decimal places. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it's got all of the decimal places as well. So that's actually just giving the x and y coordinates. Again, not something that we would need to edit by hand, but it's important to understand these files, at least vaguely, so that you can, understand if there's some kind of generation error, or you can look at them and see, well, maybe determine what happened or what was the error as far as generating them. Okay. The next thing I wanted to show you, so that gets me the etch layer and the drill hole layer. But remember, we had this silk screen layer as well, where we said, hey, this is where it can be kind of attached to the different components. So let me go ahead and do my colors, and I'm going to turn everything off, and then I'm going to put on the silk screen components. Silk screen top. And so this is all of the silk screen that's been defined here. So if we wanted to export the silk screen, and we would want to export the silk screen if we were going to do a silk screen, because it's usually a machine that does that silk screen. I forgot to hit OK. Components, silk screen top, and then hit OK. So again, I would want to create an art film for the silk screen. So if I go to export and I go to Gerber, okay, well, what I want to do is I want to actually not that. Yeah, it's weird. You actually right click on, for instance, the top or the bottom, but you just add. I believe you add manually. Yeah. And then we enter a new name for this. So we're going to call this silk screen layer. And so it now has this silk screen here, and it puts them in alphabetical order. So I could export the silk screen. So I'm going to create artwork for the silk screen. And I created with warning here. Generate output data from a metric database, may cause slight round. And then if I go here into this directory now, you'll see I have this silkscreen.art layer. And it doesn't necessarily look like it's got a lot, but it's got the information for the silk screen in there. So you can create the different layers and generate the different artwork for these different layers. Now, for this course, we're not going to necessarily worry about all of these different layers. We're going to worry just about the etching and the drill holes for this course. So let me go ahead and turn these all back on. Click OK. So that's kind of wraps us up here. So in some ways, that almost wraps us up for a bulk of the material in the course. We still have more things we're going to discuss and some new things we're going to discuss. But what we're going to focus on over the next few weeks is we're going to be focusing on our first soldering project. And we'll be setting up lab times for you to come in and be able to do soldering. And then we're also going to have a circuit diagram that you're going to be working on as far as to create, once you get the first soldering project done, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to create one where it is an infrared beam that if you break the infrared beam, a buzzer is going to go off. And so we're going to create a schematic for that and then get that all prepped you know, make any footprints we need to make. So that's going to be a much bigger kind of project as well. And as I said, in between there will still be some new things that we will discuss here and there. But for most part, like we have really kind of the whole thing done here. We've now gone from not having a board to having a board. You might say we're barely over halfway through, but again, we have several projects that we're going to be working on the rest of this semester, as well as some other kind of material.